I built 47 snowmen and accidentally sent a woman to prison. And yeah, that sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's the weirdest true thing that's ever happened to me. All I wanted was to kill some time during a brutal Minnesota winter. And somehow it turned into police reports, fraud charges, and the most satisfying karma I've ever witnessed. See, winters up here are long, like the kind that makes you question every life decision that brought you north. That year, my wife had taken the kids to Phoenix to visit her parents, and suddenly I had a silent house, a golden retriever who slept 18 hours a day, and snow piled up almost to the windows. I work from home, so time kind of blurs when you're alone like that. One morning, I stepped outside, grabbed some gloves, and built a snowman. Just one. Something to do between emails. Then I built another. And another. By the end of the week, I had a full lineup: snowmen, snow dogs, one weird snow dragon that looked like a melted dinosaur. The whole yard turned into this ridiculous frozen parade. And here's the thing, I was careful. I knew exactly where my property line was. When we bought the house, I had the land surveyed, paperwork, and everything. There were old wooden stakes marking the boundary between my yard and this empty wooded lot next door. So I lined my snow army up along that edge, still well inside my side. I was finishing number 47 big round guy pinecone buttons, sacrificed one of my scarves when I heard tires screech. And then I heard her. You ever meet someone and immediately know, this person is about to ruin your morning? That was Brenda. She was already halfway out of her minivan before it stopped moving, yelling like I'd just committed a felony. Face red, voice sharp, pointing at my yard like I'd dumped toxic waste there. What do you think you're doing? I remember just standing there holding a pine cone, completely confused. I told her I was building snowmen. You know, like a normal human in winter. And she goes dead serious that my snowmen were on HOA common property and I'd be fined $50 per day per violation. Per snowman. I actually laughed at first. Thought she was kidding. She wasn't. She claimed the HOA had voted to create some kind of buffer zone around the empty lot next door, and that it extended into what I thought was my yard. Said I had to tear everything down immediately. That's when something in me locked up. Not explosive anger, more like cold clarity. Because I knew she was wrong. I told her I had a survey. Official. County records, the works. She waved it off like it was nothing and said my survey must be wrong. Then she threatened legal action and drove off like she'd just won a war. I stood there in the snow for a minute, my dog watching me like, you good man. And I remember thinking, this is either the dumbest misunderstanding ever or something's really off. So I called my attorney. Yeah, I have an attorney. Long story involving a mailbox color dispute, don't ask. Anyway, he pulls up my documents and confirms exactly what I already knew. My property line was solid, legally airtight. But then he said something that stuck with me. If they actually voted to take part of your land, he said that's not an HOA issue, that's property fraud. And suddenly it didn't feel funny anymore. So I requested the HOA meeting records. That's when things started getting weird. They stalled at first, tried to push me to wait for some future meeting. My lawyer shut that down fast. A couple days later, the documents showed up. We went through them together. 3 pages. Dry, boring legal language. Until we hit the property descriptions. And that's where everything snapped into focus. They had listed the buffer zone as extending into the empty lot next door. But the way it was written, the boundary line was shifted 15 feet into my yard. Not legally filed, not recorded with the county, just written that way in their internal documents, like reality by committee. I remember staring at the screen, feeling this weird chill that had nothing to do with winter, because at that point it stopped being about snowmen. Someone had either made a massive mistake or tried to quietly redraw property lines. So we ordered a new official survey. The night before it happened, I woke up to headlights sweeping across my bedroom, looked outside and saw 2 guys in coveralls walking toward my yard, carrying shovels. I was outside in pajamas and boots before I even realized what I was doing. They had a work order from the HOA to remove unauthorized structures. At 11 at night, I called the police right there while we were talking. The younger guy looked nervous, the older one just annoyed, like this wasn't the first shady job he'd done. As soon as they heard sirens in the distance, they bailed. That was the moment it stopped being a neighborhood annoyance and started feeling ugly. The next morning, the county surveyor showed up. Older woman, no nonsense, the kind of person you instantly trust with sharp objects and legal truths. She took her time. Measurements, GPS documents, real professional work. Neighbors started gathering while she worked. Word spreads fast when drama smells this strong. And then Brenda showed up. Same minivan, same energy, marching over like she was about to supervise a firing squad. She actually told the surveyor the results would prove the HOA was right. The surveyor just looked at her and said, "Real calm, I've been doing this for 37 years. The county records are clear." And when the final measurements came in, it was exactly what I already knew. Every single snowman was well inside my property. I even had extra space before the real boundary. Brenda went pale, then red, then pale again, and she left without a word. I wish I could tell you that was the end, that she apologized and everyone moved on. Yeah, no. A few days later, a letter came from the HOA's lawyer threatening legal action anyway, which honestly might have been the dumbest move she made, because that's when my lawyer started digging deeper. And that's when the twist hit. The person who originally measured the buffer zone, not a licensed surveyor, it was her brother-in-law. Just some construction guy with a tape measure and apparently a lot of confidence. Once that came out, everything unraveled fast. There was an emergency HOA meeting. Packed room. Neighbors shoulder-to-shoulder tension thick enough you could feel it. Board members started turning on each other. People realizing they'd been misled. Questions flying. And then my lawyer dropped it plain and simple. The property description in their records didn't match any legal boundary on file. Never had. Which meant one thing. Fraud. You could actually hear the air leave the room. Brenda tried to call it a mistake. But mistakes don't usually involve midnight demolition crews or fake property lines. Then someone brought up the police report about the shovel guys. That was it. You could see the moment the room turned on her, like a switch flipped. Within 20 minutes, she was forced to resign. Full audit ordered. Records corrected. Legal fees covered. The whole thing collapsed like a house of cards. I should have felt triumphant right then. But honestly, I mostly felt tired. Relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. But the real ending came a couple days later. I was in my home office when I saw a police car pull up at the end of the cul-de-sac. Then another. They went straight to her house. About 20 minutes later, I saw Brenda walk out in handcuffs. And that's when I learned the part nobody expected. Once investigators started looking at the property records, they found more. A lot more. Missing maintenance funds, unauthorized accounts, money that never went where it was supposed to. Turns out she hadn't just been overstepping authority, she'd been skimming money for years. Tens of thousands. The snowmen didn't ruin her life, they just exposed it. She ended up pleading guilty. Prison time, restitution, the whole legal package. And the craziest part? If she'd just left me alone, if she'd ignored one bored guy building dumb snow sculptures, she probably would have gotten away with everything. That realization stuck with me longer than anything else. Because sometimes people don't fall because someone attacks them. They fall because they pushed too far and finally hit something solid. After she was gone, the neighborhood changed. You could feel it. Lighter. Friendlier. The new HOA backed off the petty nonsense. People started doing small things again, colorful mailboxes, wildflowers, weird decorations, life stuff. The next winter, my new neighbor came over and joked that we should build twice as many snowmen just to celebrate. So we did, 94 of them, spanning both yards like a frozen festival. And for the first time, nobody complained. Every winter since then, when the first snow falls, my kids run outside and start rolling giant snowballs like it's a sacred tradition. And I always have this quiet moment where I look at the property stakes still sitting there, and I remember how close everything came to going a different way. Because here's the truth, I didn't expect to learn from a pile of snow and one very angry woman. Most people don't stand up when something feels off, not because they're weak, but because it feels easier to just avoid the fight, to tear down the snowmen, pay the fine, move on. But sometimes the small fights aren't actually small. Sometimes standing your ground over something ridiculous is the only reason a bigger truth ever comes out. And sometimes the people who try to control everything end up undone by the most harmless thing imaginable. In this case, 47 snowmen and one very stubborn homeowner who refused to knock them down. And I still think about that whenever winter hits. Not the anger, not the legal drama, just the sound of my kids laughing in the snow, building something temporary and joyful and completely theirs. Funny how something so simple can expose something so rotten. So here's what I'm curious about. If you were in my place, if someone tried to bully you over something small but clearly wrong, would you fight it? Or would you let it go just to keep the peace? And if you've ever dealt with someone abusing a little bit of power like that, I'd honestly love to hear how it played out for you. Because sometimes the wildest stories start with the smallest line in the snow.